The book that I'm going to be reviewing today is going to be a little different from my usual reviews. How is it going to be different, you may be asking? Well, I'll tell you. The book that I'm going to be reviewing today contains not just one, but 3 short stories within it, making it technically an anthology book. In this review, I will be reviewing all 3 of these stories within this one book and giving my thoughts on them as usual. The book is called Cookie Soup and Other Stories from the Sesame Street Goodnight Stories series. The stories were written by Michaela Montine and they were illustrated by Joe Ewers. The first story is called Big Bird and the Lost Bear. It begins with Big Bird taking notice of how bad of a shape that Radar, his teddy bear, is in. One of his button eyes were hanging by a loose thread, his plushy fur is dirty, and some of his stuffing is coming out of one of his ears. Clearly, Big Bird has played rough with Radar too many times lately, and Radar has been in much better days in his little plushy life. Big Bird decides to leave Radar in his nest to rest while he goes to playgroup. Once he gets there, Big Bird has a busy morning doing things such as painting pictures, playing with toys, and singing songs. The playgroup teacher informs Big Bird that next week will be his turn to bring in something from home to share for show and tell. Big Bird wants to bring Radar, but remembers how bad of a shape he was in when Big Bird left him. The teacher tells him that maybe Radar will be in better shape next week. Big Bird isn't sure of this and can't stop thinking of Radar the rest of the morning. I don't blame Big Bird in this case. I would be concerned myself, especially if I was someone who was lacking in knowledge of how to take care of teddy bears in bad of a shape like Radar is in. When Big Bird arrives back home to his nest, he announces to Radar that he's home. Only Radar is not in his nest anymore. Feeling puzzled, Big Bird looked around everywhere around his nest, but is unsuccessful in finding him. Knowing how Radar is in no shape to be outside of the nest, Big Bird decides to search all over Sesame Street for him. Once again, Big Bird is unsuccessful in finding Radar. He asks pretty much every person and character he comes across, and every single time, the person or character answers, "No, I have not seen Radar." Poor Big Bird is close to crying and seeing how hopeless his situation seems to be coming, but Big Bird does not give up. Good job, Big Bird. That's the spirit to have in a situation like this. Just when Big Bird was at the end of his rope, he walks past a laundromat and spots something very familiar within it. Can you guess what it is? If you said his teddy bear Radar, then you are absolutely right. Big Bird's grandmother, Granny Bird, is also in the laundromat with Radar. Big Bird is overjoyed to see Radar and Granny Bird. Granny explains that she wanted to surprise Big Bird with a visit, noticed how bad of a shape Radar was in, and took Radar with her, and she fixed him, gave him a bath as well. Big Bird thanks Granny and tells Radar that he'll be taking him for show and tell at playgroup next week. What a nice, happy ending to a nice story. The end. Onward to the second story. The second story in this book is called Cookie Soup, which is what this book is named after. The story begins with Ernie coming home to 123 Sesame Street after spending some time playing in the park. He's surprised to find that Cookie Monster was waiting for him. Cookie Monster announces that he will be making dinner for Ernie. Aw, that's very sweet of him to do that for Ernie, isn't it? But Ernie tells Cookie Monster that since he and Bert haven't been grocery shopping yet, there's not very much in the kitchen to make a dinner with. After thinking for a moment, Cookie Monster has a solution to this problem and asks Ernie for a cookie, which Ernie has for him. Excited, Cookie Monster finds that this said cookie is just what they need to make cookie soup. Ernie has never heard of such a thing, and I'm sure none of you have ever heard of it either. Stay tuned and you'll find out. Cookie Monster informs Ernie that this said cookie soup is an old Monster family recipe and he'll love it. The soup begins with a pot of boiling water. Cookie Monster drops the cookie into it, and after cooking the cookie for a moment, Ernie and Cookie Monster add salt and pepper to it. After looking around for more flavoring ingredients, Cookie Monster adds 1 big red onion, and 2 big brown potatoes to the soup. While the soup is cooking some more, Cookie Monster looks in Ernie's refrigerator and gets excited when he finds more produce to add to the soup. He adds 3 ripe tomatoes, 4 orange carrots, and 5 stalks of celery. Have you noticed the pattern with the quantities of ingredients that Cookie Monster and Ernie have been adding to the cookie soup so far? They go in numeral order: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a clever idea, and I like how the author included this in the story to add some math education to the target audience while enjoying the comical aspects of this story. Cookie Monster asks Ernie what else is there in the refrigerator. He answers leftover roast beef, and Cookie Monster gets more excited, saying this said ingredient will make the cookie soup the best soup ever. They add, can you guess how many slices of roast beef? 6 slices to the soup. After some cooking, the cookie soup is finally ready to serve, and Cookie Monster devours a big bowl of cookie soup. Ernie tastes it and is very impressed with how the soup turned out. He tells the audience how he can't wait to tell Bert how good of a soup you can make starting with just 1 cookie. I'm impressed with this too, considering that this soup is basically a beef vegetable soup with an, I can imagine, subtle sweetness from the single cookie in the background. The end. Onward to the third and final story. The third and final story in this book is called Never Ask a Honker to Spend the Night. The story begins with Grover Monster speaking directly to the reader, giving him or her some advice. The advice is to never invite a honker to spend the night at your house. Why is this? Well, to begin with, Grover tells us that honkers honk. Wow, we would have never guessed that without you telling us, Grover. Thank you. Heavy sarcasm. Grover goes on to tell us that from the moment that a honker arrives at your house, they honk. They honk hello to your mother, which is a given, because as far as in the history of Sesame Street, honkers don't verbally speak like the other characters do. They honk as a means of communication. The honker keeps doing that as you are doing various activities during the honker's visit to your house, including while you eat dinner, watching TV, and getting ready for bed. It gets even worse when you and the honker go to bed. Even when a honker sleeps, it never stops honking. It basically snores, and it comes out as a honking noise as before. Grover tells us that there is absolutely no way to block out that sound. I think there is a way with the sound machine in real life. As a result, Grover has gotten no sleep at all the night that the honker stayed over his house. That's why Grover is giving the reader advice, which is to never invite a honker to spend the night at your house. Grover, I know you mean well, but given the fact that honkers don't exist in real life, this advice is pretty useless, I'm sorry to say. The end. My final thoughts on this book. As far as Sesame Street anthology books go, this one is just fine for what it is. I like the idea behind it, which is to make the stories short in order for us adults to have stories to read to kids before going to bed at night and to accommodate a child's short attention span. In order to give you my opinion on the book, I will tell you about the stories contained within, ranging from my favorite to my least favorite. My favorite story in this anthology is hands down the story that this book is named after, Cookie Soup. What I like most about this story is not only the playful feeling throughout it, but I also like how strongly empathized the lesson of resourcefulness is. I'm impressed by Cookie Monster's cleverness, his knack for cooking, and his enthusiasm throughout the making of the soup along with Ernie, helping him out. The results are surprisingly good with the soup in the end, and I'm sure will be pleasing to any reader. This story is clearly based off the folk story called Stone Soup, in which 3 travelers enter into a town asking for food, and when the inhabitants of the town have very little food to offer them, the travelers tell the people about their recipe for stone soup, beginning with an ordinary stone and builds up from there, including adding meat and vegetables. The end result is a delicious soup enjoyed by everyone. Just like how Cookie Soup ended, and I think it's a great translation into the Sesame Street universe. My second favorite story in this book is Big Bird and the Lost Bear. I consider this my second favorite story in the book because I like how devoted Big Bird is to his special teddy bear, including treating it like it's a child to him, right down to leaving Radar in his nest to give him rest while he's not in the best of shapes. Even feeling strong emotions, like crying when finding that Radar is missing. The ending was very nice as well, with Big Bird finding Radar safe and sound, as well as finally fully restored to great shape by his granny bird. What a sweet grandmother to do that for Big Bird. I feel like this story doesn't have very much to it, when comparing it to the previous story that I consider my favorite. Nice story, but not really very much to say about it, I think. As you can probably guess from my thoughts previously in this video, my least favorite story in this collection is Never Ask a Honker to Spend the Night. The story is pretty much just Grover Monster telling us that it's not a good idea to invite a honker over to his sleepover, which I don't think really goes anywhere, especially since, as mentioned before, honkers don't exist in real life, so the information Grover gives us is pretty much useless. I think Grover should have kept this saying in mind when he invited the honkers to a sleepover at his house, which is, look before you leap, meaning that he should have known that he was in for when throughout the sleepover the honkers honked non-stop and Grover gets sleep deprived. Sorry, Grover, but this is really your own fault that things turned out the way they did. This story is so short that it's over before you know it. It led me to think, does this really count as a story? Because it led me to think that the author was rushing to complete the minimum page limit of this book before a deadline. What do I think of the illustrations in this book? Like in most Sesame Street books I've reviewed, the illustrations are very well designed. While they're not as gorgeous as some of the other artists they've worked on in these books, they serve the purpose very well, giving a comical style whenever it's called for, as well as an emotional feel where it's needed as well, like in Big Bird and the Lost Bear. I especially like the cover art of this book too, which is very fitting, and I think it highlights one of the best moments of the book, I think. In the end, would I recommend this book to others? Well, yes and no. I think it's a good pick if you're looking for some short stories to read the children before they go to bed at night and fitting to the size of their attention spans, but seeing how, with the exception of one of the stories, most of these stories are generic and nothing overly special. That would be my main criticism of this book, and for that reason, I would consider this book to be recommended with reservations. This collection is fine for what it is, but I think it would be very suitable for its target audience, more than anyone else. If you can find this book, I would suggest you pick it up and see for yourself. I hope you enjoyed my review of Cookie Soup and other stories. If you have any suggestions for future review videos, please leave them for me in the comments below. Please comment, share my video, and subscribe to my channel as well. Have a nice day, everyone, and thank you very much for watching.